Man, this series is absolutely awesome. Oh, the Knicks just pulled off an incredible comeback from 20 points down. And it was all built on phenomenal defense and Karl-Anthony Towns having what can only be described as an out-of-body experience on offense. Coach Thibodeau made some very adventurous rotation decisions tonight that really paid off in the end. Of course, Mitchell Robinson was in the starting lineup. Everybody wanted to see that matchup, or at least a lot of people did. We got those Shamet and Don Wright minutes in the first half, which was interesting to watch unfold. Deuce McBride picked up 3 quick fouls early, which definitely complicated things for the Knicks rotation. But the real story was what happened with Halliburton, and how the entire arena went absolutely nuts after Hallie got that steal for a breakaway dunk, especially after he had just made a really tough three-pointer moments before. The energy in that building was electric, and you could feel the momentum starting to shift even in those early moments. Through so many great defensive plays, you could see this team starting to find its identity and rhythm, setting up what would become one of the most memorable comeback performances of the season. Karl-Anthony Towns was absolutely the star of this game with 24 points, but these were the loudest 24 points you can possibly imagine. It mostly took until the fourth quarter for him to really get going and take complete control of the game. He opened that fourth quarter with what I want to say were 3 really aggressive drives. One on Miles Turner from the corner, one on Turner from the top of the key, and one on Siakam, where he was either finishing strong on these drives or getting fouled in the process. The beauty of Towns' game is pretty simple when you break it down. It's the threat of his jumper that pulls defenders out to the perimeter. And then from there, he can just go to work against bigger players. Now, of course, this is easier said than done. UQIN, just do this every single time you on offense. But that little stretch there, in the fourth quarter, was absolutely the dream scenario for that type of basketball. Right after those aggressive drives, he hit a quick three-pointer over Miles Turner, and then he had just the most audacious 3 you can imagine for a big guy. He ran the screen himself with both Siakam and Turner involved in the action, and he just pulled up like a guard, just went up with complete confidence and knocked it down. It was incredible to watch. Towns had another one of those really tough drives on Tony Bradley as well, just continuing to attack the rim with that same aggressive mentality throughout the fourth quarter. But what made this comeback even more special was how the defensive intensity just went absolutely crazy for the Knicks during this stretch. A lot of it was just switching and closing out like madmen, or just getting around screens well enough to disrupt the Pacers' offensive flow. McBride had a couple of plays where he was really sticking to Halliburton around the screen action, and Shamet had a similar play on TJ McConnell, where Towns was able to get a contest on him as well. There was one really crazy defensive sequence where it involved Towns, Josh Hart, and McBride. The amount of rotations and the number of times you had 2 guys going to 1 guy on a closeout, which usually you don't want to do, but they were just closing out so ridiculously hard that it worked. They even left Siakam open in the corner for a second, and then Towns had to basically defend Miles Turner at the top of the key and then rotate all the way back to Siakam. Meanwhile, eventually Miles Turner missed a 3 over Mitchell Robinson. The defensive energy just kept building throughout that entire sequence. It was beautiful basketball to watch when everything clicked like that. You had Towns switching onto Halliburton a couple of times, and there was one play where I felt like Halliburton was going to challenge him in the post, but he just didn't. Towns' presence was that intimidating. The defensive rotations were just phenomenal throughout this stretch. Then OG Anunoby just absolutely bodies Aaron Nesmith as Nesmith was trying to body him back the other way. Og blocks him clean, and it was just a statement play that showed the Knicks' defensive intensity. I felt like the only comfortable shots that the Pacers could get down the stretch were either Siakam getting an isolation face-up opportunity against someone like Josh Hart, or when they would run Nembhard as a second screener for Halliburton to try to free him up for something. Otherwise, the Knicks were just guarding everything incredibly well. You had Deuce switching and facing up on Siakam to either prevent him from getting the ball, or if he did manage to get the ball, Deuce just wouldn't let him get good position at all. The switching was seamless, and the communication was perfect. It should be said about Deuce that during that mini run he had, it wasn't just him making plays, but it was a lot of him. His defense allowed Mitchell Robinson to basically lock up TJ McConnell at the rim because Deuce was trailing him pretty hard and forcing tough shots all game long. Deuce's pressure on what I think was TJ McConnell again led to, or I think contributed to, Theron getting called for that illegal screen, and then Deuce made a huge three-pointer on the other end. Those are the kinds of plays that completely swing momentum in playoff basketball. This whole performance was exactly what you fear with the Knicks. Can they win when Jalen Brunson doesn't have a great game? Brunson still managed to get to 23 points off of his free throws, showing his veteran savvy and ability to impact winning even when his shot wasn't falling. He did have one big, very tough shot over Nesmith late in that game that was absolutely huge for maintaining their lead. But when Towns goes completely crazy like he did tonight, and when the defense is playing at that elite level, you can still win games even when your primary scorer isn't at his absolute best. That's what championship-level teams do. They find ways to win through multiple contributors and elite defensive effort. The wild thing about this comeback was how it seemed to come out of nowhere, but really it was building through all those small defensive plays and hustle moments. Every steal, every deflection, every hard closeout was building towards something special. And when it all came together in that fourth quarter, it was absolutely beautiful to watch unfold. OG Anunoby was fantastic tonight, going 6 for 9 from the field and 4 for 6 from three-point range. A lot of those threes weren't easy shots either, unless I'm just remembering incorrectly. I do remember one of his step-back threes specifically. This was when they were down maybe 15 or so in the third quarter, and the deficit could have really ballooned out of control. They didn't get a great shot off on that possession, but OG just made it anyway with that smooth stroke of his. Those are the little plays that can really add up for you over the course of a game, especially in a comeback situation where every basket feels crucial. One thing that is absolutely wild to see, and some of it is because of foul trouble, of course, but in a game where they could have gone down 3-0 in the series, Brunson only played 31 minutes, and Towns played 33 minutes. I think that's the last thing we would have expected from Coach Thibodeau tonight. Given his reputation for playing his stars heavy minutes, but sometimes the basketball gods smile on you, and the role players step up in exactly the right moments. The fact that they were able to pull off this comeback without leaning entirely on their two best players shows the depth and character of this Knicks team. It's the kind of performance that can really galvanize a group and give them confidence moving forward. For the Pacers, obviously you're not going to panic after this game. They were up 20 points. The place was going absolutely nuts. And it's very possible they just let their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. These things happen in playoff basketball, especially when you're playing on the road. But as a Celtics fan, if there is one thing I can tell you about this Knicks team, it's that if you leave the door open just a little bit, which I believe is the second time I've used that phrase this series, the first one being about the Knicks' disastrous Game 1, suddenly things can flip kind of fast on you. The momentum swings in playoff basketball can be absolutely brutal, and once a team like the Knicks gets rolling with their defense and their crowd behind them, it becomes very difficult to stop that avalanche. The Pacers learned that lesson the hard way tonight. Now, I do think that up until this game, the Pacers had done a better job of not falling into the same traps that the Celtics fell into earlier in the season. Things like the ball not moving around enough and getting stagnant on offense. But it did feel like there were more possessions in this particular game, where suddenly there were 7 or 8 seconds left on the shot clock, and the Pacers hadn't really gotten into anything yet. Some of that late shot clock pressure was definitely due to the Knicks' defensive pressure, of course. But the Pacers seemed to lose some of their offensive rhythm that had been serving them so well in the earlier games of this series. When you're up by 20 points, sometimes teams can get a little comfortable and stop executing with the same precision that got them the lead in the first place. The Knicks' pressure defense was definitely a factor, but you also have to credit the Pacers for fighting back and not completely collapsing when things got difficult. They just ran into a buzzsaw of defensive intensity and timely shot-making that's very hard to overcome, especially on the road. It should also be said that a lot of that fourth quarter run happened with Mitchell Robinson actually not in the game, which was surprising given how important he's been to their success. All of the net ratings and lineup numbers up to this point would suggest that any type of significant run that was going to happen for the Knicks would feature him prominently in the game. But you never know with basketball. Sometimes the unexpected lineups work out perfectly, and role players step up in ways you don't anticipate. The beauty of playoff basketball is that it can surprise you. And tonight was definitely one of those nights where everything seemed to fall into place at exactly the right time. For what it's worth, the Knicks really fell behind during that second quarter. At least in the first quarter, during those first 10 minutes or so. They didn't immediately go out to a 10-point deficit early in the game. unless they did and I'm just not remembering correctly. But it was really that disastrous second quarter that put them in such a deep hole to begin with. Sometimes, in playoff basketball, you have those stretches where nothing goes right. Shots don't fall. Defensive rotations are a step slow, and the other team seems to make everything they attempt. That second quarter was one of those stretches for the Knicks. But what made this game so special was how they responded to adversity. Instead of letting that deficit grow even larger, they managed to weather the storm and keep themselves within striking distance. The fact that they were able to maintain their composure during that difficult stretch and then completely flip the script in the fourth quarter shows a lot of mental toughness and championship-level character. These are the kinds of games that can define a series and potentially a season. When you're down 20 points in a playoff game, especially on the road, it would be very easy to just accept defeat and start thinking about the next game. But this Knicks team showed they have that special quality that championship teams possess. The ability to never give up and find ways to win, even when things look hopeless. I think that's all I've got to say about this incredible comeback performance. We now have two series that could potentially be going some form of distance. And that's exactly what makes playoff basketball so compelling and unpredictable. This Knicks team has shown they have multiple ways to win games. They can win with Brunson carrying the offensive load. They can win with Towns taking over like he did tonight. And they can win with their suffocating defense that can completely change the complexion of a game in just a few minutes. The fact that they were able to pull off this comeback without their best player having his best game is incredibly encouraging for their championship aspirations. It shows they have the depth, the coaching, and the mental toughness to compete with anyone in these playoffs. For the Pacers, this has to be a learning experience. They played well enough to win this game for 3 quarters, but playoff basketball is about executing for 48 minutes, and they learned that lesson tonight. The good news for them is that they've shown they can compete with this Knicks team, and if they can clean up some of those late-game execution issues, this series could still go either way. But what a performance by the Knicks tonight. What a series this has become. And what a reminder of why playoff basketball is the absolute best basketball you can watch. When everything clicks like it did tonight, there's nothing quite like it in sports.